Malkin joins us for what it means in the upcoming elections. But first, the defenders of lawlessness. That's the focus of tonight's angle. If you want to come on immigration, check out the freaks at their anti-ICE protests. The siege at the Portland, Oregon ICE building started on June 17th and continues today.
Protesters even followed them home to their residences, followed them when they went to pick up their kids at daycare, repeatedly threatening their lives. This was an absolute siege of an ICE facility. A lot of people don't know this. This really isn't getting covered out in the mainstream media. We lost that building for 10 days, almost 2 weeks. The protesters took control of that building. And again, these were not normal protesters. This, folks like Antifa, violent militant groups.
You notice you haven't seen the media coverage of that aspect of it? We're going to get into more in just a moment. We have new information for you tonight. But to top it all off, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler shot down the terrified ICE officers' calls for help, saying that police would respond to them, quote, when there were imminent life safety threats. Okay. And last week, Wheeler told demonstrators to peacefully disengage for their own safety. Heck with the safety of the ICE employees. This is totally out of control, and it's backfiring big time on the Democrats. A recent Reuters Ipsos poll found that immigration was the top issue for U.S. voters heading into the November 2018 midterm elections. It edged out even the economy. And it's hard to believe that the voters' concern about immigration here is focused on what the left wants to do, this phony concern for the kids at the border. I don't think so. Remember, not so long ago, Democrats at least gave lip service to our basic right to border enforcement.
It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years.
Illegal immigration is wrong, and a primary goal of comprehensive immigration reform must be to dramatically curtail future illegal immigration.
Look, I voted numerous times when I was a senator to spend money to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in.
Well, and remember this from President Obama back in 2014, who sounded a lot like Trump on this issue, except for the no protests or marches part.
Do not send your children to the borders. If they do make it, they'll get sent back. More importantly, they may not make it.
Of course, almost none of them were sent back. But instead of warning of the dangers of making family treks across the border like President Obama just did, the new, more Antifa-friendly Democrats warn about an America that actually punishes border jumpers. And they are never happier on the left than when they're using kids as political pawns.
I've heard of the stories.
And with ICE.
Year-old infants being before the judges, and it's almost Kafka. Chuck E. Cheese uses things like this to check parents and their children when they're there.
Okay. With that absurd analysis, Vermont would be better off with the Chuck E. Cheese mascot as one of their senators. Oh, my God. Oh, wait, Chuck E. Cheese does a better job of keeping parents together. Here is an ICE official, Matthew Albence, attempting to introduce this concept called applying the facts to the law to this Democrat senator from Hawaii, Mazie Hirono.
Again, I think we're missing the point. These individuals are there because they have broken a law. There has to be a process.
They have broken a law only as deemed so by the president with his...
No, ma'am. They're there for violation of Title VIII of the immigration. Illegal entry is both a criminal and civil violation.
My understanding is that under zero tolerance, these are no longer civil proceedings, but in fact, were criminal proceedings.
They're both...
I'm confused.
Okay.
Okay. God bless her. She's confused. Has all that volcanic ash blowing across Hawaii begun to affect the good senator's cognitive skills? What part don't you understand? Laws on the books, violate the laws, there will be a penalty. And the pundits wonder how Trump got elected? Out of the roughly 2,500 children who were separated from their family units at the U.S.-Mexico border, more than 1,800 have already been reunited with their parents. And of the 700 children or so who've still not been reunited, 431 have parents now outside the United States. Those parents were either deported or voluntarily abandoned their children, a fact that is conveniently omitted from the Dem Tifa crowd. Democrats wailing over the plight of the remaining children are completely ignoring the facts. Due to domestic or drug abuse, many of these parents are now deemed unfit to care for their children or dangerous for their children. So newsflash, the U.S. government is protecting the border kids today. Or do the Democrats want them to be reunited with parents who could traffic them or who are criminals themselves? Is that what they want? And by the way, the kids who may have a chance of being deported back home to be in their homeland with their parents are now being blocked in a lawsuit by the ACLU. Isn't that, by the way, wasn't that American Civil Liberties Union? Now it's Illegal Immigrant Civil Liberties Union. In the meantime, we're caring for these children, and the U.S. taxpayers are footing the bill. But who cares about these facts when peddling emotion dripping with concern is so much easier?
Melania Trump went to the border and asked these empty questions about when and how these families will be put back together. She doesn't care. She's planning Christmas at the White House. Are you idiots running this country? You seem like child abusers to me. Ask any doctor, ask any child welfare specialist, ask any psychiatrist, ask yourself, is this abuse? This is abuse.
That was abuse, just watching that. You ever notice how the empathy, though, just runs one way? There's never the same kind of empathy for the families victimized by violent illegal alien crime, or DWI deaths because of illegal immigrants, or drug trafficking, gun running. Never any empathy for Americans who've been pushed out of their jobs in the workforce for cheaper illegal labor. Never any empathy for ICE agents who have their reputations smeared or lives threatened for just doing their jobs.
Our commitment to consistent and fair enforcement of the law is demonstrated on a daily basis by the integrity, the unbiased professionalism, and the compassion that the men and women of CBP exhibit towards the aliens we encounter, particularly towards the most vulnerable. We do not leave our humanity behind when we report for duty.
That was a great line. Now, Americans are just a lot smarter, let's face it, than the left and their media poodles think. Americans understand that we are not a country without borders. Of course we have compassion. That's why we're taking, I think, pretty good care of them, all things considered. They're not with their families, but they're being fed, clothed, doctor's appointments, entertainment, sports, schooling, interpreters, lawyers. That's not nothing. And Americans will not be guilted into supporting politicians who put the interests of illegal aliens ahead of our own citizens. Here's why Congressman Ron DeSantis will be the next governor of Florida. He gets it.
We can fight illegal immigration. All we got to do is enact E-Verify and stop sanctuary cities.
We want maximum border security and respect for our heroes, ICE, Border Patrol, and law enforcement. And we're going to have tremendous border security that will include the wall. That will include the wall.
The applause went on and on last night. The biggest applause lines when the issue of immigration came up. Look, in my mind, it's actually sad. It's really sad to see what's happened to the party of FDR and John F. Kennedy, the Democrat Party, on this issue and so many others. They used to believe America was worth defending. Her laws, her Constitution, the Declaration, her borders, her history. Now their most vocal voices believe it's time to destroy that old order and replace it with something kind of closer to socialism. But we're not about to let that happen. And that's the angle. Joining me now for reaction is Tom Homan, the former acting director of ICE. Mr. Homan, thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. I got to tell you, when I'm seeing what's going on in Portland, Oregon, and beautiful Portland, they have a history of a lot of political activism. That's fine. This is not your ordinary political activism. What's happening there that the American people are not seeing because the media will not adequately cover this story?
What isn't happening, during the time I saw your clips earlier, and Chris Crane was right, the mayor has refused to take action on those folks that have illegally prevented us from doing our jobs by shutting our building down for over a week. How many child molesters, predators, traffickers weren't arrested that week? How many criminal aliens that entered this country illegally and committed yet another crime, weren't arrested that week? A lot of criminals are now walking the streets of Portland that would have been arrested that week. So the mayor turned his back on the citizens of Portland for his own political ambitions.
Now, Chris Crane was talking about the Antifa infiltration, or some would say takeover, of this protest. Are the run-of-the-mill kind of millennial protesters with the magic marker signs and the black mask people kind of working hand in glove there, from what you're gathering?
Yeah, I watched video of the Portland office showdown for several days, and Antifa was there. Matter of fact, they hung their Antifa flag up where the United States flag
Wait. Well, they took down the U.S. flag, they climbed the building, they took down the U.S. flag, and they replaced it with an Antifa flag?
Yes, ma'am. And the Patriots at ICE, when they took the building back, first thing they did is raise the American flag back up.
You know what? The only thing I can think of is like that is when ISIS was rolling through parts of Iraq, and they were going into those Christian villages in Mosul and so forth. They were knocking down those churches, taking off the crosses, and raising the ISIS flag. It's a form of domestic terror.
It's pathetic what's going on in Portland. I don't know who's worse, that mayor or the mayor in Oakland or Philadelphia or New York. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them right now who have never accepted this president, and they're going to put their own political ambitions ahead of the public safety of their citizens. And I want to remind the Portland mayor, I'm sure he's going to hear about this, these ICE employees are also taxpayers and citizens of the city of Portland. He has a duty to protect them when they call the police.
Zephyr Teachout, interesting name, a Democratic candidate for New York Attorney General, calls to abolish ICE and said it this way. Let's watch.
ICE has to be abolished. And as Attorney General, I will continue to speak out against ICE. I will prosecute ICE for their criminal acts. We have stories of consistent abuse within ICE. The idea that we could call this law enforcement is a real offense to the idea of law itself.
A real offense. I think she's mixing up her, I think she means offense, but that's okay.
Well, I've never seen that video, but now I'm more irritated, and I wasn't walked in here knowing what we're going to cover. That Attorney General candidate, I hope that's as far as she gets. Look, prosecute ICE agents. ICE officers and agents have taken more than 5,000 criminal aliens off the streets of New York that walked out of their sanctuary jails. ICE has done more for public safety in that state than their own governor has. ICE officers on the northern border have shut down opioid trade and
But they say, Tom, that the reason they're upset is because you're separating families, you're focused on deporting these families when you should be focused on the illegal immigrants. So they're conflating Border Patrol, of course, HHS, the detainment centers, and ICE. They're putting them all in one big pot. So they're saying, well, you could do a better job if you weren't focusing on these poor children.
Let me tell you something about the whole separating families. I watched the hearing yesterday, and I was quite disturbed by some of the questions from the Democrats. They kept wanting to put the blame on Border Patrol, HSS, ICE. They had a solid process for these families, because we've been separating families for decades, first of all. This isn't new to the administration. Decades. But if they want to blame somebody, Congress needs to look in the mirror. Because I've been up on the Hill several times along with the head of CBP and CIS talking about the loopholes of the Florida Settlement Agreement. If they want these folks to see a judge and claim asylum, we do too. There's one way you can guarantee they see a judge is keep them in a family residential center. But they don't want to do that. So they refuse to fix the loopholes. So the Attorney General did what he had to do operationally to defend our border. The Attorney General did exactly what he should have done.
Zero tolerance is the way to go. He was right. We have a runaway judge situation in this country who are acting as super legislators.
The judge in San Diego, He ordered during the 2500 unification, stop doing the DNA testing. When we did the DNA testing for the children under 5 to 7% weren't the parents. So if you extrapolate that to 2,500 people, how many children do we have to release to people that weren't their parents because that judge decided DNA wasn't important?
Wow. And the 20% of the kids were not brought across by their own parents.
2,500 children separated. There's 10,000 children in custody HHS that were separated by their parents who hired a criminal organization to put their kid in the trunk of a car and smuggle them to the United States.
Who are these parents?
That is child abuse.
Who are these parents who send their kids across the border alone? I'm sorry, but what kind of parent does that?
I watched the clips earlier claiming the administration of child abuse. The child abuse is hiring a criminal organization to put your kid in the trunk of a car and smuggle them to the United States.
Tom Homan, hey, great to see you.
Appreciate it.
Miss you over there at Homeland. Thanks so much.
I'm in the fight.
All right, good for you. And Bob Mueller is prepared to make a significant concession to the Trump legal team. Citing sources, John Roberts reporting that Mueller has agreed to reduce the number of questions for President Trump in a potential interview from his initial list to 49. Mueller's also willing to accept some answers in writing, though he wants oral answers to others. Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani responded to the tug of war over an interview earlier today.
They sent us a proposal. We responded to their proposal. It took about 10 days, and yesterday we got a letter back from them. And now we're in the process of responding to their proposal. You think they're at the end of it? They should render their report, put up, I mean, I guess if we were playing poker, we're not. We can put up or shut up. What do you got? We have every reason to believe they don't have anything.
Joining us now to analyze, Alan Dershowitz, author of the book, big bestseller, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, along with Saul Weisenberg, former deputy independent counsel in the Whitewater investigation. All right, Professor Dershowitz, what do you make of this latest development? Supposed concessions, they don't seem like huge concessions to me, but nevertheless, down from 49 questions, some in writing. Does this change the calculus?
I don't think so. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. All I have to do is ask him one question. What was your motive? Why did you fire Comey? Or why did you ask Comey maybe to go easy on Flynn? All they want to do is get him to say, in a context where he could be charged with a crime, something that's controversial and something that somebody else will come in and testify and say, no, he told me something different. No, he told me that his motive was this or that. Motives are so vague and subjective. And you can be charged with lying to prosecution officials, even if you tell the truth. If there's another witness who comes in and gives a different account, and the prosecutor is trying to get you and wants to put you in a perjury trap, and believes or says he believes the other witness, who may not only be singing, but he may be composing in order to get a better deal, you've walked into a perjury trap. So in the end, I don't think his lawyers are going to let President Trump testify orally at all. Look, the president may get his way. He says he wants to testify, but no lawyer is going to walk his client into a perjury trap.
Tonight, the New York Times, Saul, is reporting that the president is pushing for an interview with Mueller against the advice of counsel. Now, I don't know if this is kind of a, they're playing around here on this and it's like good PR, or if that's the real deal. But let's pretend for the moment that's real. Your reaction?
I think it's suicidal. I think it's idiotic. I agree with the professor. Here's the real key here. Based on everything we know, they don't have anything close to an obstruction case on the president. But it is much easier, in addition to the stuff that Professor Dershowitz said, it is much easier to prove a case of lying to the government under 18 U.S. Code Section 1001 than it is to prove an obstruction case, particularly based on what they have. It has to be material, but the threshold for a material lie is extremely low. And their cases are legion of convicting people under 1001, including Martha Stewart. So it's a terrible strategy, and I can't believe, I would physically restrain my client in these circumstances.
You and I both. Yeah, you and I both. Okay, gentlemen, hold on, Alan. We're going to stay for another segment. We have an incredible story ahead. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's stunning connection now to the Mueller probe. You won't believe it. Stay there. If you've happened on one of the other cable news networks recently, first of all, tisk tisk. Well, you're probably bombarded with updates on former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort's federal trial kicked off today. Despite no allegations of Russian collusion, Manafort's facing serious prison time in a case brought by the special counsel Bob Mueller. It's all related to Manafort's work for Russia-friendly Ukrainian political party there that predated his time with the Trump campaign. So he got swept up in this whole deal. Interestingly enough, though, there are now reports that Mueller has referred 3 cases to federal prosecutors in Manhattan involving high-profile lobbyists who also worked on behalf of that same Ukrainian-linked group, without registering, though, as foreign agents. Haven't heard much about that, have you? Could it be that because, well, one of those names is Tony Podesta, super lobbyist in the Democratic Party and brother of John, the chairman of Hillary's failed 2016 campaign? Or that other name, Greg Craig. He's the former White House counsel for Barack Obama. Rejoining us now for reaction, Alan Dershowitz and Saul Weisenberg. Okay, guys, how potentially serious or not is this deal with referring both Podesta and Greg Craig to the Southern District of New York? Greg Craig, full disclosure, worked for my old law firm, Skadden Arps, and they parted ways months back. But let's start with you, Professor Dershowitz. What's going on here?
Well, Greg's a great guy. He lives on Martha's Vineyard with me. I see him periodically over the summer. Full disclosure. Look, this just proves that you never needed a special counsel. They're taking these cases, more and more of them, and referring them to ordinary U.S. Attorney's Office. The Manafort case also could have easily been tried by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Northern Virginia. The other Manafort case by the District of Columbia U.S. Attorney's Office. Why do we need a special counsel? The cases don't involve Russia for the most part. The only cases that involve Russia are cases that'll never be tried at all, the 12 Russians. They're not coming to Disneyland any day soon to be served, and they're not going to be extradited by Vladimir Putin. So we're seeing more and more proof that we never needed a special counsel, that the special counsel will end up filing a report and getting some low-hanging fruit and getting some convictions largely unrelated to what his mandate originally was. I didn't like special counsel when they were appointed to get Bill Clinton. I didn't like them in other cases. I don't like them now. I don't think they're consistent with the principles of democracy.
But similar, Saul.
But same,
it's interesting.
Same,
we're vacuuming up a lot of information about people, and it's going up to the special the Southern District of New York. Same deal with Michael Cohen. It does seem like it's expanding to places that have nothing to do with the original charge.
Well, 2 things in my view. Number one, I think probably if it's really gone to the Southern District, unlike Cohen, where they could say this is just not in our bailiwick, here this was part of the original Manafort thing. But I think probably they're going to decline those cases. And it's just my guess. And that if Mueller declined cases against Democrats, he would get a tremendous amount of criticism for it. So it's easier to send it to the Southern District.
It looks better for Mueller, who's been accused by the president, including in tweets today, of having 17 prosecutors with animals.
Which I don't agree with.
Not all of them have ties to the Democrats.
It's just the president shouldn't be doing that. But here's the other thing. Here's the difference. Right or wrong, Mueller sees Manafort as a key to his Russia conspiracy case. He believes, right or wrong, that Manafort knows something, and Manafort is the key, and that's why he's going after Manafort, and he's clearly going to try.
Didn't Judge Ellis say that today again?
Judge Ellis has said it repeatedly, and he has said, I don't like it, but the system lets him do it. And every prosecutor has done that at some point in their career. So that's the key to Mueller. Manafort is the key. The question will be is if he's convicted, does he become like Susan McDougal and say, nuts to you, I'm still not talking to you, or does he actually decide he'd rather talk than spend if he has any information?
He was there for 5 minutes at the Trump campaign. But, I don't know.
You made 4 or 5
Trump's
months.
Worried at all.
4 or 5 months.
I don't think Trump is worried at all about Paul Manafort. I know for a fact he's not worried about it. Dershowitz.
You made a very good point, though. You made a very important point, and that is it's much easier for a U.S. attorney to decline a case. And that's why we should have U.S. attorneys. They're professional prosecutors, and they don't have a target. And they can decline cases if the facts and the law don't warrant prosecution.
Okay, let's
but
advance the narrative.
But it's much harder for a special counsel to do that.
Okay, let's advance this narrative, though, today. We have this trial kicking off in the Eastern District of New York. And it struck me that much of the time in these opening statements, a lot of the conversation went to Paul Manafort's wealth. And there was one point where they brought in this witness, okay, Maximilian Katzman, former manager of a New York City men's wear store called Alan Couture, claiming Manafort spent more than $929,000 on suits between 2010 and 2014. Judge Ellis then says, cantankerous old Judge Ellis, who I love dearly, all this document shows is that Mr. Manafort had a lavish lifestyle. He had a nice home with a pool and a gazebo. It's not relevant. Of course, he went on to make a really funny comment about the clothes, saying, and look, and he spent a lot on clothes, and he wasn't even that well dressed. I mean, is it a crime now? So it's a crime now to spend a lot of money. Right. Well, we got a lot of people guilty of that in this town, Washington, D.C.
The judge also said, if it doesn't say Men's Warehouse, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, it's like that. Okay, like exactly. I like TJ Maxx. You like Men's Warehouse. When I see that figure, I'm like, wow.
That's my kind of judge. That's my kind of judge. I'll never be convicted of anything if expensive clothing are a prerequisite. I also go to Men's Warehouse.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that is that under the law, the law is terrible on showing lavish lifestyle. Under the law, the prosecutors in most courts would be allowed to say that, but Judge Ellis really doesn't like it. And every time he makes those comments, the jury is listening to him, and they know that he doesn't like it.
Yeah, Professor Dershowitz, at one point, they talked about the fact that Manafort used foreign wire transfers to pay for his clothes. And this Maximilian Katzman, who's like the Cato Kalin of the trial so far, he says, well, that's the only customer I've ever had pay for. Who cares? I mean, again, this is not against the law. I don't know what Manafort did. I think this whole thing, I don't know, my antenna, my spidey senses are going up about this case. I don't know if it's Rick Gates. I don't know if they're afraid to bring Rick Gates in as a prosecution witness. They seem to be hesitant about bringing Gates in, which I find interesting. Professor.
Well, whenever you have a witness who's admitted to lying, it's a very hard job to put him on the stand. And the witness always says, well, I lied in the past. Yes, I know that. But now I'm telling the truth. And then the lawyer for the defense says, well, you expect to benefit from telling the truth, don't you? You expect to get a good deal. So, you know, it's very hard to get a successful conviction based on a flipped witness who might not only be singing but composing. And this judge is very sympathetic to that. He used that term. He said sometimes witnesses who were squeezed not only sing but compose and make the case better in order to get a better deal.
Yeah, but real quick, they talked about doing that early morning raid. We're almost out of time. Early morning raid. Apparently the FBI had a key to his condo. And they said, how'd you have a key? They said, we don't know how he had the key. A little weird.
We don't know. Yeah, that's
a little weird. I mean, again, this is my old litigator sense. I'm like, that's interesting.
But listen, Gates is going to testify.
Gates is going to testify. All right, guys, we're going to have you back all the time. This is going to be fascinating. Great panel. Great to see you in person. Big name Democrats now scouring Hollywood for new production gigs. We'll tell you about the latest. Arroyo next.
Lincoln was elected to unite a country and stop slavery. Democrats.
Peculiar new habits. And for more, we're joined by Fox News contributor, New York Times bestselling author of the Will Wilder series, Raymond Arroyo. Okay, Raymond, let's start with some trends that you picked up on among millennials. And they might be what? And what do they tell us about the new generation?
Well, and you don't want to overgeneralize because there's some great things about millennials. They're contemplative, they reuse things, but
contemplative.
They are.
What, and the laptop people at Starbucks?
No. They're willing to move. They're willing to change and find their destiny. No. They're more mobile than we are. Here's what they're doing. They have adopted what's called small house movements, where they live in campers or RVs.
Or containers.
Containers. These are little babies that they're offering to them. And they're also living in pods in their parents' backyards. Now, 3/4 of all campers are Generation X and millennials because they are transient. They're impermanent a little bit. But there's an interesting thing I saw in the Los Angeles Times and in a ton of other periodicals. They are green thumbs among the millennial generation.
How do we go from containers to the green thumb?
I'm going to make this fit. Listen, a 2017 gardening survey found that of the 6 million new gardeners in America, 5 million are aged 18 to 34. They're millennials. They are cohabitating with plants, Laura.
Oh, because there's too much of a commitment with a cat.
Right, exactly. They don't want to go all the way with a cat.
So cactus.
But a fern or a cactus will work. So they're jamming their apartments. You can get off the graphic. Let's go back to the houses. They're jamming their apartments with greenery because they want a sense of connectiveness. You know what my take on this is? They want something natural in an impermanent world. My advice, get a pet, get a child. Don't
get a child. You know, where are you going to get that, at Costco?
Well, no, maybe good to get married first.
Yeah.
That's usually how it happens.
Okay.
But my advice, don't spend your youth on the ficus. It will not give you a Mother's Day card, and when you get old, it will not water you. So don't do that. Now, there's more we have to get to, and of course, the prompter's not there. There it is. I have to tell you about a great decision by Netflix this week. They released a notice to subscribers that they would soon be streaming a new documentary with a very snappy title, The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, My Life's Journey Through Music, it was called. Well, this week, Netflix said they had a technical mix-up and that the documentary would not be airing on their service. Now, this is based on a 5-CD musical release. I had forgotten.
Oh, I played it on my radio years ago.
I had forgotten.
Oh, yeah.
Louis Farrakhan
Screwy
is a
Louis.
violin player. Well, I wasn't going to go that far.
Screwy Louis,
He's a
he's
violin
talented.
player and a calypso singer.
He's a talented singer.
Well,
He's kind
I
of
want to show you a
Harry
trailer.
Belafonte of calypso.
Well, you know, Harry Belafonte of hate.
Yeah.
Here's his calypso, a little bit of his upcoming album that the documentary was based on. Watch.
Album that speaks from the pain of the heart of a little boy wanting to see his people free. This is a project that attracted some of the most brilliant, award-winning musicians and artists.
Now, Shaka Khan, Stevie Wonder, I hope he's going to sing a duet of You Are the Anti-Semite of My Life.
Oh,
that
no,
would be
no.
cute with them together. Shaka Khan, Common. Why are these people lending their names to somebody like Louis Farrakhan? This man has peddled hate like no one else. And I have to tell you, when I started listening to some of his original compositions, Laura, this is something that you could actually put a playlist together and I think you'd really find
For a radio
beat in
show,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, for the radio show. He's got a song called Heed the Call, Y'all. A white man's heaven is a black man's hell. Listen.
Hell, pain, torture, and misgiving. Yet the Bible speaks of a heaven filled with material luxury, which the white man and the preacher has right here. God and Savior, Allah has come, has declared the white man's day is done.
That's quite
the white man's day is done. He's
there's no rhyming, I noticed. This is kind of like a Cornell West combo. It's Cornel West with Reverend Wright.
Yeah, it's sort of William Shatner meets Reverend
what is
Wright.
the Space Odyssey music
it's
in the
very
background? All right, we gotta
Anyway,
hurry up. Go.
let's
What's the
move
next
on about
one?
Hillary
Real
Clinton,
quick.
who's branching into TV. You teased this earlier. She has a new deal with Steven Spielberg.
Of course.
Now, let me tell you how this came about. You asked me earlier, how did she get a gig? She's got no TV experience at all. She read a book, and it's on the suffragette movement. She liked the book, brought it to her lawyer, Bob Barnett. He took it to Spielberg. Spielberg bought it and made her an executive producer. This is how it happens.
This is how Hollywood takes care of its own.
You know what you need to do? Go find a book and then bring it to your lawyer and maybe speak.
Oh, I'm sure. By the way, the notorious RBG, I was down at Dinesh D'Souza's coming on. I went to the premiere of his movie tonight. Guess what the first big poster was I saw? The first big RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the new superhero of the left.
You see that? Star power.
So now the Obamas are at Netflix, Hillary's at Netflix.
Yes. No, Hillary's not. Hillary's at CBS. She's going to be on Madam Secretary on their premiere on October 7th, playing herself. You can DVR it. You'll love it. I'll bet she's
Well,
really
with Harvey Weinstein gone, the Clintons need some benefactor in Hollywood. Raymond, thanks so much. I got to get that Screwy Louis out of my head.
You're going to be grooving to Screwy Louis all
that
night.
is. I'm surprised he didn't do it in numerology. Remember his numerology thing?
No,
he loves
I don't. You're
the
way
numbers.
too close to this. This was new to me.
Oh, well. The left is enraged by a new documentary, speaking of Dinesh D'Souza, chock full of inflammatory claims about Democrats' history. Dinesh joins us with his reaction right after his world premiere. Tonight, the uproar next. They're better at getting under Democrat skin than documentary filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. In his new movie, out tonight, big premiere tonight in Washington, is riling up liberals with some incendiary claims about the left's history. Here's a sample.
Lincoln was elected to unite a country and stop slavery. Democrats smeared him, went to war against him, assassinated him. Who are the real fascists?
Both Mussolini and Hitler set up and ran welfare states.
This is done by the do-gooders, the liberals, the people who wanted to improve society.
Joining us with more, Dinesh D'Souza, whose film, of course, I said, had the big Washington, D.C. premiere tonight. Hey, Dinesh, how are you? Good to see you again.
Nice to be on the show.
So, boy, you're really kicking the hornet's nest with this film. I mean, it's out tonight. You have a book out today. We're going to have you on radio, I guess, tomorrow, the next day. They're saying it's you're making leaps of logic. The Democrats aren't the real racists. Look at what they're doing to these poor kids in the detention centers. Trump doesn't like brown people because he's putting this immigration enforcement into place. What's your response to all these critics?
Well, there's a lot here. The movie focuses on two things, racism on the one hand and fascism on the other. And as you know, from the time Trump got elected, the left has been dropping these two big incendiary bombs, not just on Trump, but on the right, on conservatives and on Republicans. So the movie has a historical component because it dives into what is the meaning of fascism, who is the real party of racism, but where it really takes off is it looks at where's the fascism today, where's the racism today, and it shows that the fascist and racist tail belong not on the Republican elephant, but on the Democratic donkey.
You're getting a lot of hits from the Variety, the Guardian. They love you over at the Guardian. They say it's in this embarrassing new film from the far-right provocateur, all personal attacks, Dinesh D'Souza. He compares Donald Trump to Abraham Lincoln, claims Hitler was LGBT-friendly, and calls Antifa the real Nazis.
So let's look at this Trump-Lincoln business, because that's probably the most inflammatory. The very idea of putting Trump and Lincoln on the cover and morphing their heads together. But look how similar their situations are. In 1860, an outsider president, Lincoln, comes in. He's narrowly elected, in fact, in a three-man race. And the moment he gets in, all hell breaks loose. The Democrats in the North are calling for his assassination, which happens eventually. The Democrats in the South are willing to break up the country. So they're trying to get rid of Lincoln, you may say, by any means necessary. So look how eerily similar that is to our moment, in which Trump faces a Democratic Party that has still refused to accept the result of a lawful election, wants to get rid of Trump however they can, and is pursuing all these strategies, including the inflammatory race card and fascism card, to discredit Trump and his supporters.
This Antifa group is terrifying. Black masks, whipping Molotov cocktails, throwing desks through windows, with signs, "Stop the fascists." They're anti-fascist. But you point out in the film, which I was lucky enough to see the first 20 minutes before I had to come do the show, they want to stop speech. You've dealt with it on college campuses for decades. They want to stop speech, stop debate, and they're terrorizing people from speaking out.
They look like fascists, they act like fascists, except they claim to be anti-fascist. But I think I'm also worried not just about Antifa on the street, but I would call it the fascism of the deep state. Because when a party deploys the weapons of the state, the FBI, the IRS, the Justice Department, yes, against your political opponents, what you're doing is you're merging the idea of the party with the idea of the government. Now, Mussolini did that. Hitler did that. So that is as close as you're going to get to clinical fascism, American style. And yet it's coming from the left.
Now, Richard Spencer is someone the left holds up as that he's alt-right. He's this guy who's he's the real Republican Party. He's racist. And you actually interviewed him. He was at that Charlottesville rally. You interviewed him in the movie. Let's watch.
What would be your take on, say, Reagan?
I do not think that he was a great president.
Who's your favorite president?
There is something about Jackson. There's something about Polk as well, someone who only served one term.
But I mean, Jackson and Polk, as you know, both Democrats.
Party is just the vessel that one uses.
I mean, Jackson's the founder of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. It's just, but also, Dinesh, you and I have been doing this politics, culture stuff since we were at Dartmouth together in the 1980s. Had you ever, I never heard of this Richard Spencer until 5 minutes ago. I literally had never heard of him.
There's a deep strain of leftism inside the white nationalist movement. Jason Kessler, the organizer of the Charlottesville rally, was an Obama supporter. Think about it, a white supremacist who voted for Obama, and an Occupy Wall Street guy. Now, this guy, Richard Spencer, in the core part of the interview, I asked him, you know, where do your rights come from? Do they come from God? He goes, no, we don't have any rights, and the rights that we have are given to us by the government. So he's a statist, he's a collectivist, and yet the left when they see this, it horrifies them because it doesn't fit their narrative. And so they don't want to interview Spencer on this kind of thing. So I think the movie, in a way, blows the whistle on Charlottesville and that whole Charlottesville narrative, and it blows it up and shows that there's a whole unreported side of it in which the left is trying ultimately to smear the right with guys like Spencer who are their willing accomplices.
Do you think this movie, in a way, is a culmination of, you wrote A Liberal Education, you wrote the book on racism, what is it called, The New Racism?
The End of Racism.
The End of Racism. And a lot of the stuff you've written about over the years, it kind of, in a way, comes together. And this right before the midterms, important. Everyone's got to see this film.
The race narrative I've been pursuing for 20 years. The fascism narrative is new, and it's eye-opening to me. And when we have a scene in the movie of senior Nazis getting ready to pass the Nuremberg laws against Jews, and they have in their hands the laws of the democratic Jim Crow South. And they're using the democratic laws as a model for Nazi laws.
Well,
Amazing.
I don't think, we can't expect our high school kids to learn any of these facts today. Congratulations, book, movie. You're driving all the right people crazy. Thanks so much for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
And just how easy is it for non-citizens to vote and cast ballots? Can't be that easy, right? Well, guess what? Michelle Malkin will tell us the truth next. A disturbing new report is raising questions about non-U.S. citizens' ability to register to vote and cast ballots. The Washington Times reporting, quote, non-citizens are signing up to vote in states including Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Virginia, according to the research by the Public Interest Legal Foundation. It's a nonprofit law firm that advocates for election integrity. The foundation found that a large percentage of those non-citizens managed to cast ballots as well. And yet, here's the common refrain we always hear from the Democrats.
The vote fraud mantra is said so often, it's almost said robotically, that some people have unthinkingly begun to believe that the issue is real.
This whole notion of election or voting fraud, this is something that is constantly been disproved. This is fake news. The notion that there are a whole bunch of people out there who are going out there and are not eligible to vote and want to vote. We have the opposite problem.
Joining us now with a reaction, conservative commentator, CRTV host Michelle Malkin. Michelle, those golden oldies are just, they're the gifts that keep on giving. They're always worried about voter ID because they think it's so hard to get government-issued ID in this country. It's really difficult. So they think that's onerous. But then they're not worried about illegal immigrants voting. They brush it all off, even if it cancels out a legal citizen's vote in any given election. Your reaction to this new report?
Yeah, Laura, first of all, I commend the Public Interest Legal Foundation for doing the work that the liberal open borders press won't do. I mean, you've got the leftists in the elite media screaming about foreign interference and meddling in our political system, and having non-citizens and illegal aliens voting at our ballot boxes is the textbook definition of foreign meddling. This goes back years and years and years, and back when I lived on the East Coast, of course, all around me, all of the counties in then liberal blue Maryland were inviting non-citizens, quote unquote, and they kept it very vague, right? They say, well, we only want legal immigrants who haven't naturalized yet to be able to feel a part of the process and cast their ballots in school boards. And this has been the gateway, Laura, as you know, for all manner of legalizing illegal aliens' participation in civic and electoral life. It is radical and it's transformative, and it's happened right before our eyes, all legally. That's the real scandal here. And whether it's the PILF or Judicial Watch or Project Veritas, which in the last several election cycles has been able to do undercover work and show that Democrats are nonchalant about it, what it shows you is that these people are more interested in banning plastic straws and 3D guns than they are in illegal aliens from the ballot box.
Yeah, do you see the story, of course, last week, San Francisco local board elections, I think school board elections, illegal immigrants now can vote. And they say, look, they're in the community. They're in the community. Why shouldn't they have a right to vote? Now we have that Ninth Circuit ruling today that you can't defund sanctuary cities. You can always count on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on the issue of immigration to get it wrong. I'm sure it'll be reversed at the Supreme Court, but nevertheless, The president is up against a completely biased media, purposely ill-informed media, runaway judges until he can appoint more, and Democrats and the old GOP guard. And they don't want that wall. Let's face it, the GOP on Capitol Hill, they do not want this wall. Correct, Michelle? Do not want it.
Yes, they don't. And we've fought these people for a long time, you and I, Laura, long before there were a lot of Johnny-come-latelys on this issue. And we can smoke out the phonies and the lip service payers from the people who truly believe in these fundamental principles of sovereignty. It is going to be a reckoning come these midterms. And I've said many times, as people have tried to sort of downplay the internal strife over this, of course it should be front and center in front of the midterms. I mean, the Gallup polls are now showing that the majority of Americans are with us more than ever. And you've got left-wing enclaves, even in Oregon, which now has an anti-sanctuary measure on the ballot. And it qualified with, I think, something like 50 or 60,000 more signatures than were needed. That is left-wing Pacific Northwest Oregon. When is the Beltway GOP going to get the message?
Michelle Malkin, you have done such great reporting on this, and you're also doing some reporting on another case we're going to try to get to next week that involves criminal justice reform. And I tweeted something, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to get too far into it, but I want to bring you back to discuss that particular case next week. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. I'm so grateful. Wrongful convictions are a huge issue for me.
Yeah, wrongful convictions, prosecutors who are out of control in our country, and people rotting in prison when they could actually be gainful members of society. There's a lot of abuses out there, and we really appreciate your covering that. Michelle Malkin, thank you so much. We have a lot to still get to. We'll squeeze it in if we can when we come back.